David, you're on mute.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Hare Krishna. We're studying from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 7, entitled Scheduled Incarnations and Their Specific Functions. And today we're focusing on Text 3. Text 3, Chapter 7, Canto 2 of Srimad Bhagavatam. Chapter 7 is entitled Scheduled Incarnations with Specific Functions. Today is June 21st, 2020. Rainam Namaskritya Naram Chavu. Rainam Namaskritya Naram Chavu Notamam Devim Saraswati Vyasam Chatojaya Modiraya. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one should first offer respectful obeisances to the personality of Godhead Narayan, to Narayana Rishi, the supermost human being, to Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and to Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Nasta Prayesh Vabhadrishu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Tamashloki Bhakti Bhavati Naistiki Jagye Cha Kardama Grihe Dvija Devahutjam Strivi Samam Navabi Atmagatim Swamatre Uche Yaya Atma Shamalam Gunasanga Pankam Asmin Vituya Kapilasya Gatim Prapede Jage Chakardama Grihe Dvijadeva Hutyam Stribi Samam Navaviratma Gatim Svamatre Ucheyayatma Shamalam Gunasanga Pankam Asmin Viduya Kapilas Yagatim Prapede Jage Chakardama Grihe Dvijadeva Hutyam Stribi Samam Navavir Atmagatim Svamatre Ucheyayatma Shamalam Gunasanga Pankam Asmin Viduya Kapilas Yagatim Prapede Jage Chakardama Grihe Vijadeva Hutyam Stribi Samam Navavir Atmagatim Svamatre Ucheyayatma Shamalam Gunasanga Pankam Asmin Viduya Kapilas Yagatim Prapede Yage Chakardama Grihe Dvijadeva Hutyam Stribi Samam Navaviratma Gatim Svamatre Ucheyayatma Shamalam Gunasanga Pankam
Asmin viduya kapilasya gatim prapete.
Asmin viduya kapilasya gatim prapede.
Yage chakadama grihe dvijate bahutyam.
Yage chakardama grihe dvijadeva hujyam.
Sribi samam navaviratmagatim svamatre.
Sribi samam navabhiratmagatim svamatre.
Uche yayatma samalam guna sangapankam.
Uche yayatma shamalam guna sangapankam.
Asmin viduya kapalasya gatim prapede.
Asmin viduya kapilasya gatim prapede. Jage chakardama grihe dvijadeva hujyam. Stribi samam navaviratmagatim svamatre. Uche yayatma shamalam guna sangapankam. Asmin viduya kapilasya gatim prapede.
Yagye chakardama grihe dvijadeva hutyam.
Yage shakara grihe vijadeva ujam.
Sribhi samam navaviratma gatim svamatre.
Srivi samam navaviratma gatim swamatre.
Uche yayatma samalam guna sangapankam.
Uche yatma shamaram samam.
Asmin vidhuya kapilasya gatim prapede.
Asmin viduya
Kapilasya gatim prapede.
Yage chakadam agrihe vijadeva devahutyam.
Yagye chakardama dvijadeva hutyam.
Srivi samam navaviratma gatim swamatre.
Sribhi samam navaviratma gatim svamatre.
Uche yatma shamalam guna sangapankam.
Uche yayatma samaram guna sangapankam.
Asmin viduya kapilasya gatim prapede.
Asmin vidhuya kapilasya gatim prapede.
Yage shakardama grihe vijadeva ujam.
Yage chakardama grihe dvijadeva hutyam.
Sribi samam navaviratma gatim svamatre.
Sribhi samam
Navaviratmagatim
svamatre.
Uche yayatma shamaram guna sangapankam.
Uche yayatma samalam guna sangapankam.
Asmin viduya kapilasya gatim prapede.
Asmin viduya kapilasya
gatim prapede. Hare Krishna. Would anyone else like to lead the chanting of the verse? Jagye
Jagye
took birth.
took birth.
Cha
Cha
also.
also.
Kardama,
Kardama.
the Prajapati named Kardama.
The Prajapati named Kardama.
Grihe,
Grihe.
in the house of.
In the house of
Dvija,
Dvija.
O Brahman.
O Brahman.
Devahutyam,
Devahutyam.
in the womb of Devahuti.
In the womb of Devahuti.
Strivi,
Srivi.
by women.
By women.
Samam,
Samam.
accompanied by.
Accompanied by.
Navabi,
Navapi.
by 9.
Nine.
Atmagatim,
Atmagatim.
spiritual realization.
Spiritual realization.
Svamatre,
Samatre.
unto his own mother.
Unto his own mother.
Uche,
Uche.
uttered.
Father.
Yaya,
Yaya.
by which.
By which.
Atma Shamalam,
Atma Shamalam,
coverings of the spirit soul.
coverings of the spirit soul.
Guna Sangha,
Guna Sangha,
associated with the modes of nature.
associated with the modes of nature.
Pankam,
Pankam,
mud.
mud.
Asmin,
Asmi,
this very life.
this very life.
Viduya,
Viduya,
being washed off.
being washed off.
Kapilasya,
Kapilasya,
of Lord Kapila. Gatim,
15,
liberation.
liberation.
Prapede,
Okay,
achieved.
achieved.
Translation. The Lord then appeared as the Kapila incarnation, being the son of the Prajapati, Brahmin Kardama, and his wife Devahuti, along with 9 other women, sisters. He spoke to his mother about self-realization, by which, in that very lifetime, she became fully cleansed of the mud of the material modes and thereby achieved liberation, the path of Kapila. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. The instructions of Lord Kapila to his mother Devahuti are fully described in the 3rd canto, chapters 25 to 32 of the Srimad Bhagavatam, and anyone who follows the instructions can achieve the same liberation obtained by Devahuti. The Lord spoke Bhagavad Gita, and thereby Arjuna achieved self-realization, and even today, anyone who follows the path of Arjuna can also attain the same benefit as Sri Arjuna. The scriptures are meant for this purpose. Foolish, unintelligent persons make their own interpretations by imagination and thus mislead their followers, causing them to remain in the dungeon of material existence. However, simply by following the instructions imparted by Lord Krishna or Lord Kapila, one can obtain the highest benefit even today. The word Atmagatim is significant in the sense of perfect knowledge of the Supreme. One should not be satisfied simply by knowing the qualitative equality of the Lord and the living being. One should know the Lord as much as can be known by our limited knowledge. It is impossible for the Lord to be known perfectly as he is, even by such liberated persons as Shiva or Brahma, so what to speak of other demigods or men in this world. Still, by following the principles of the great devotees and the instructions available in the scriptures, one can know to a considerable extent the features of the Lord. His Lordship Kapila, the incarnation of the Lord, instructed his mother fully about the personal form of the Lord, and thereby she realized the personal form of the Lord and was able to achieve a place in the Vaikuntha Loka, where Lord Kapila predominates. Every incarnation of the Lord has his own abode in the spiritual sky. Therefore, Lord Kapila also has his separate Vaikuntha planet. The spiritual sky is not void. There are innumerable Vaikuntha planets, and in each of them, the Lord, by his innumerable expansions, predominates, and the pure devotees who are there also live in the same style as the Lord and his eternal associates. When the Lord descends personally or by his personal plenary expansions, such incarnations are called Amsha, Kala, Guna, Yuga, and Manvantar incarnations. And when the Lord's associates descend by the order of the Lord, such incarnations are called Shaktivesh incarnations. But in all cases, all the incarnations are supported by the invulnerable statements of the authorized scriptures and not by any imagination of some self-interested propagandist. Such incarnation of the Lord in either of the above categories always declare the Supreme Personality of Godhead to be the ultimate truth. The impersonal conception of the Supreme Truth is just a process of negation of the form of the Lord from the mundane conception of the Supreme Truth. The living entities, by their very constitution, are spiritually as good as the Lord, and the only difference between them is that the Lord is always supreme and pure, without contamination by the modes of material nature, whereas the living entities are apt to be contaminated by association with the material modes of goodness, passion, and ignorance. This contamination by the material modes can be washed off completely by knowledge, renunciation, and devotional service. Devotional service to the Lord is the ultimate issue, and therefore those who are directly engaged in the devotional service of the Lord not only acquire the necessary knowledge and spiritual science, but also attain detachment from material connection and are thus promoted to the kingdom of God by complete liberation, as stated in the Bhagavad Gita 14.26. Mam cha yogya vicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samati yaitan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. Even in the non-liberated stage, a living entity can be directly engaged in the transcendental loving service of the personality of Godhead Lord Krishna, or his plenary expansions like Ram and Nrsimha. Thus, with a proportionate improvement of such transcendental devotional service, the devotee makes definite progress towards Brahmagatim or Atmagatim and ultimately attains Kapilasya Gatim, or the abode of the Lord, without difficulty. The antiseptic potency of devotional service to the Lord is so great that it can neutralize the material infection even in the present life of a devotee. A devotee does not need to wait for his next birth for complete liberation. Om Ganatimirandasya Gananjana Shalakayam Chakshurmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Svayamupa Kadamayam Tadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Cha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Saganaraganatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitan Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe Vrindavaneshware Vishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpata Yubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanan Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaura Bhaktivinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desha Tarine Jage Chakardama Grihe Dvija Deva Hujjam Stribi Samam Nabhavir Atmagatim Swamatre Uche Ayatma Shamalam Guna Sangha Pankam Asmin Viduya Kapilasya Gatim Prapede. The Lord then appeared as the Kapila incarnation, being the son of the Prajapati Brahmin Kardama and his wife Devahuti, along with 9 other women, sisters. He spoke to his mother about self-realization, by which in that very lifetime she became fully cleansed of the mud of the material modes and thereby achieved liberation, the path of Kapila. Hare Krishna. Okay, and so this chapter is scheduled incarnation with specific functions. Lord Brahma speaking to Narada Muni about, like each verse practically covers an incarnation. And Prabhupada, you can see in so many of the purports, he's emphasizing that because there's so many things, like here's an incarnation, you're God, I'm God, that whole thing. So you know that it's described in Shabda Brahman, which means in revealed sources of pure transcendental vibration. It's Krishna, the Vedas describe incarnations. It's not a whimsical thing. Shruti Smriti Puranadi Panchracha Vidim Vida Akantiki Harya Bhakti Utpataya Vikalpate. So we get solid, perfect, infallible information about God, God's incarnations, yoga, dharma, guru. We get what's matter, what's spirit, what's super soul, what's the perfection of human life. So, and this particular verse is focusing on the incarnation of Lord Kapila Dev. And we can see that when the incarnations are mentioned, that they're mentioned with like their primary devotees. So we Nrsingadev with Prahlad, and Vamanadev with Bali Maharaj, and of course Krishna's with his devotee, like that. Even here, like in this tapestry on the wall here, so great that Krishna's flute is a devotee. The Yamuna River is a devotee. The trees, the blades of grass, they are devotees. Krishna's not. He's not alone floating in a void. And so Kapila took the two devotees that we most hear about, his mother Devahuti and his father Kardama Muni. And Prabhupada specifically mentions chapters 25 to 32 of the third canto, where those 8 chapters, Lord Kapila Dev extensively instructs his mother in the philosophy of devotional service, and and in the chapters before that, there's descriptions of Kardama Muni and Devahuti. In the last chapter of the third canto of Bhagavatam, chapter 33, that's about Kapila kind of leaving his mother's home after he has given instruction, and that completes the third canto. And so Kapila's instructions, they're generally called Sankhya philosophy. Sankhya means to count. Sam means complete, and Kya means description. A complete description of everything. A complete description of all the elements. That's Sankhya. To count. It's described about the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan. Sankhya Purvakana Magana Natibi Kalavishani Krital Nidrahara Vihara Kadi Vijital Chachanta Dina Chayal Radha Krishna Gunasmiter Madhurimanandina Samohita Vande Upasnatana Raghuyugal Sri Jiva Gopalaka. The 6 Goswamis, they were always counting. They made smart goals, and they made commitments about chanting, about offering obeisances. Their sadhana was very quantitative. Of course, they had their full heart in it. But they were setting an example. And they made daily commitments about offering obeisances and chanting japa. And by such devotional activities, they conquered over sleeping and eating. And were always meek and humble. So the effects were not just external, reducing sleeping and eating. They were always meek and humble, enchanted by the remembrance of Radha and Krishna. And so oftentimes when we hear about Kapila from Srila Prabhupada, he mentions what he calls an atheist Kapila. So there was another Kapila in Vedic history, or non-Vedic history, who also gave like an analysis of material elements. But this Kapila, who's an actual incarnation of Vishnu, of Krishna, he's giving analysis of the material elements with the one in front of the zeros, with including the elements of soul and super soul. Generally, the material elements are categorized into 24. Then the 25th element, soul, 26th element, Paramatma, super soul. And most of Western philosophy is a form of Sankhya, analyzing material elements, certainly what's called in modern empirical science, analyzing the material elements, like that. So Kapila gives, and this is thinking, like in the 14th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, right at the beginning, Krishna says, "Now I'm going to give you the most important superior knowledge." And Prabhupada confirms that, of course, in the purport, first verse of the 14th chapter. And that 14th chapter is entitled "The Three Modes of Material Nature." Now, Krishna's already talked about devotional service in the 12th chapter, the opulence of the Absolute in the 7th chapter, and the most confidential knowledge, Rajavidya, Rajaguyam, Pavitram, Idamuttamam, in the 9th chapter. And now he's going to talk about matter. It's going to be about material world. He said, this is the most important knowledge. A way we can understand that is the principle of start where we're at. Start where we're at. Okay? Like to see where and how we're entangled. It's like if we think of a ladder, we could say, what's the most important rung on the ladder? We say, well, the top rung, maybe. Or we can say, well, wherever my hand is right now, that's the most important rung on the ladder. So that's an understanding of why Krishna is saying, this is the most important knowledge, Arjuna. Yes. And so, so all the topics of Bhagavad Gita are expanded quite a bit in the Bhagavatam. So Sankhya philosophy is there in the Gita. Chapter 2, chapter 14, chapter 13, it's about analyzing material nature. In the Ishopanishad, the Upanishads emphasize that for spiritual progress, it's important to understand the process of knowledge and the process of nescience side by side. Knowledge and nescience side by side. To see, and this is so much there in Kapila Dev's teachings, to see how does material nature entrap us? How does material energy entrap us? And he really goes into it. He really goes into it. It's fascinating. And we get to see what our psychology and how we're attracted to material nature, and Krishna emphasized. So Krishna says, this is the most important knowledge, because from this we can understand how we're entrapped, and we can also realize the process of liberation, the process of how we can be liberated. And okay, so as Prabhupada quotes here a verse. This is the second to last verse of the 14th chapter. Mam yoga vicharina bhakti yogina sevate sagunan samati yaitan brahma bhuyaya kapate. So Krishna is saying, engage in devotional service and you're transcendental to the modes. Okay, and so that's true. That's true, and also it's true that for us, an important part of our devotional service is to cultivate the mode of sattva. It goes both ways. It goes both ways. That we cultivate sattvic living, and that's the most wonderful platform for transcendence. Just like we have experience, let's say. Okay, so like entering into Bhagavatam, this is transcendence. But let's say, yeah, okay, so let's say we absorb ourselves in some rajasic and tamasic stuff. We can all fill in the blank about what rajasic and tamasic stuff look like for each of us. Okay, so let's say we absorb ourselves. Maybe it's around internet, maybe it's around eating, maybe it's around sleeping, maybe it's around losing control of our anger, maybe whatever. Okay, we absorb ourselves in rajasic and tamasic activity and consciousness. Then we know it's just like, it's in that immersion, it's practically impossible to be like enthusiastic. Yeah, nonsense internet movie or news or whatever that's not my service, then it's just like, it's just practically absorbing. Yeah, let's chant rounds. Wow, let's discuss Cardamomuni. It's just not going to happen. It's not going to happen because I've sunk myself deeper into the pit. And similarly, I know myself after morning program, 4.5 hours after morning program, like I want to do some private reading of Bhagavatam. I want to chant extra rounds. Now, if right after morning program I overeat breakfast prasad, then that changes everything. Okay. So we cultivate sattva, and we're naturally more enthusiastic for transcendence. Also, in cultivating sattva, there's also pitfalls. There's also pitfalls and traps. There's the trap of sattva, because we can be so. Whereas if we're deep in rajas and tamas and we're really suffering, we've really embarrassed ourselves in rajas and tamas, then out of desperation, Krishna, Krishna, like that. So I mean, it's not linear, but as a general principle, we cultivate sattva, and we're inspired to embrace transcendence. And from wherever we're at, sattva, rajas, tamas, from wherever we're at, we engage in transcendence. And then our modes of nature do come up. The tamas, rajas, if somehow we connect with the transcendental process, read Prabhupada's books, and chant Hare Krishna, morning program, hear the pastimes described in this chapter. We somehow connect with transcendence, and then the tamas and rajas become more sattvic. So transcendence increases sattva, and sattva is a beautiful platform to enthusiastically embrace transcendence. It's a relationship there. It's a relationship. Okay, so this verse talking about Kapila Muni, Devahuti, Kardama Muni, Prabhupada right in the first sentence of the purport, he says the instructions of Lord Kapila to his mother Devahuti are fully described in the third canto, chapters 25 to 32 of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And anyone who follows the instructions can achieve the same liberation obtained by Devahuti. So, yeah, it would be natural. I want to study those chapters, and that's fully encouraged that we read something, because this chapter, it's like 1 or 2 verses on 25, 28 incarnations. And then for most of incarnations, they're expanded in 8 chapters somewhere else in the Bhagavatam, or Nrsingadev and Prahlad Maharaj expanded in practically 15 chapters of the 7th canto. First 10 chapters is about like Hiranyakashipu, Prahlad, Nrsingadev. And then the last chapters are also related to Prahlad Maharaj. And so it's natural to want to read them, and that's fully recommended. Yeah, let's go there. And I would say even more important than having an inspiration, let me read those chapters, is, I'll call it a dedication to systematically, as part of our sadhana, systematically read all of Prabhupada's books. And to supplement that systematic reading after a morning program, or we hear something, we might get a special inspiration. I want to read that passage from Chaitanya Charitamrita, and I want to study that part of the 4th canto about Prithu Maharaj, where it's about Mother Earth and like that. And so I know for me these are the main pillars of my attempts at Krishna consciousness, chanting at least 16 rounds per day, and steadily reading Srila Prabhupada's books, and as a sadhana, kind of steadily, whether my mind and emotions feel like it or not. And that as we do that steadily, as the jaundice disappears and the soul awakens, then I find, more and more I do want to and I look forward each day to these pillars of the sadhana practice that Srila Prabhupada gave us. Srila Prabhupada, he was rising at 1 a.m. to give us these books, because his vision is this is this is one way we can attempt to repay Srila Prabhupada for the abundance of matchless gifts that he's given us. Dedicate ourselves to, discipline ourselves to read his books. And actually that's the part of each day I look forward to the most. Reading Prabhupada's books. I remember my early day in State College when I was going to the center run by Stambadas Prabhu, and then after the programs, there was this kind of pretty small, but a side room taking prasad. And usually I would try to just show up for the prasad, but he would trick me with the schedule sometimes. So I would hear philosophy or kirtan. And there was a side, but in that side room, it was like not a big room. There was like maybe one chair, but it was bookshelves all around, and with all of Prabhupada's books. And I mean, once it was one of the programs, and there were some visiting devotees from Gita Nagari. That's a farm community in central Pennsylvania. And so there was one devotee, and I was like maybe in my early 20s. He looked to be about 30 or so. I remember I was taking prasad maybe on my 8th samosa or something like that. And so he was talking to me, and he was intelligent, but he wasn't harsh. And he was just cutting through all my deceptions and illusions. And because I'd already been coming for a few years, hadn't started chanting or anything like that. I wasn't following anything. But he, and then he said, okay, so why don't you try the process? Because he was kind of illustrating that I had no logical good argument not to actually give myself to this lifestyle and to this process. And we were sitting there, and then he could, and then I started saying some things, and then at one point he said, well, that's because you're weak. You're laughing. Yeah, I don't know who he is, but it's like almost 40 years later, but I still resent him. I can't believe he said that to me. But because I had a lot of experience with transformational trainings and counseling and things like that. And he was very gentle, but he was just, that's because you're weak. And he knew that I knew that he knew that I knew, I had nothing to say. Because I had just
nice constructive feedback.
Yeah, constructive feedback, and
Or constructive criticism.
But I'll never forgive him.
Oh, yeah.
So, no, that's because you're weak. And then, I couldn't admit that he was right, because that would be terrible. But in myself, I knew that's never happened to me before, because, like that. And then some of you know my history a bit. But then maybe a year and a half later, I left Pennsylvania and backpacked around Europe, and because I was weak, and because I had so much of an image built up there, and a false ego, whether it was State College or Philadelphia, whether it was my friends there in town or my family members. So when I got 4,000 miles distance in Europe, and I found that I got my first day outside of the East Coast of the United States. I'd never been west of Pittsburgh till that point. But we landed at Heathrow Airport, and the first thing I did was find the Govinda's restaurant on Soho in London. And it was a Sunday feast, and the next day was my first day outside of USA ever, even outside the East Coast. And I found myself getting on a train to a place called Lechmore Heath and visiting Bhaktivedanta Manor. And wherever I went for the next several months, I would just set myself up at a youth hostel and start chanting, because I couldn't do those things because I was too weak and attached to my false ego there. So when I created distance from, I'm not saying that I created distance because I went a spiritual life. Krishna worked through my desire. Krishna had a plan for me, and like that, and so, but I didn't like say, oh, I'm going to go, so then I'll start chanting Hare Krishna. But then, I didn't have all the sources that I was allowing to weaken my spirit because no one knows me here. Oh, I can chant. I was in that room taking prasad, my fourth, fifth plate, whatever it was, and Stamba Das was speaking to me. And again, I think they were seeing like I had no good reasons or good arguments like that. And he said, yeah, so why don't you? And then I was looking at all the books, and I was like, well, and he said, yeah, we had like 60 books here. I go, yeah, well, I would, for me to do this, I would need to read all the books. I would need to read all the books. That's the thing. So he said, yeah, well, we welcome you to do that. We welcome you to do that.
Nothing stopping you.
Yeah, here they are. And I started reading the books but that was because my mentality was, I already knew inside there's nothing that makes more sense, and everything I've heard here makes complete sense. But I said, oh, but I need to read all the books, and then I'll find some flaw, and then that I won't need to take this seriously. Okay, so that was another.
You were hoping.
Yes, that was the idea. That was the idea. And then going around, backpacking around Europe, I read Bhagavad Gita as it is, cover to cover, at the Villa Vrindana, outside of Florence, Italy. And in my early days in Israel, before I started at the WUJS Institute, WUJS stands for World Union of Jewish Students. And I studied there in Arabic. Before I went there, I stayed for about 2 weeks at the ashram, the Bhakti Yoga ashram in Ranana. Rukmini was there, like that, and before I left there, they really wanted me to stay, and again, I had no reason not to, but I had this plan at the WUJS Institute. So Dhanavir Prabhu, he gave me these big copies of Krishna book and Nectar of Devotion. Krishna book, Nectar of Devotion. And then I was, over the next few months, I read Krishna book, Nectar of Devotion. And then I was chanting 16 rounds. So Prabhupada's books, these are transcendently powerful. And that's why to read them and share them with others. Read them, share them with others. This is the greatest nectar in my experience. Jage chakardama grihe dvijade bahutyam stripi salam navabhir atmagatim svamatre ujayayatma shamalam guna sangapankam asmin viduya kapilas jagatim prapede. The Lord then appeared as the Kapila incarnation, being the son of the Prajapati Brahmin Kardama and his wife Devahuti, along with 9 other women, sisters. He spoke to his mother about self-realization, by which in that very lifetime, she became fully cleansed of the mud of the material modes and thereby achieved liberation, the path of Kapila. One more point before we go to discussion. It's a point that's emphasized in the verse and purport, since I didn't mention it, that yes, so the idea is Kapila Dev's giving Sankhya with the 1 in front of the zeros, who we are as spirit soul, and that's for the most part missing in other attempts to analyze what's this world about. Because Krishna, he gives Sankhya in the 7th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Bhumira po nalo vayu kamana buddha evacha ahankarami tiyame bina prakriti ashtada. 8 material elements, earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intellect, false ego. And then Krishna says, Aparayami tastvanyam prakatim vidimepram jiva bhuta mahabhovyayedam daryate jagat. And then Krishna says, and in this world there's another entity, and that's the spirit soul who is struggling in conditioned life with the material nature. So that's 8 elements, and then that's expanded to 24 elements in most versions of Sankhya. And then again, the 25th element is the soul. And to realize, because this sattva means self-realization, right? I mean, when sattva is mixed with rajas and tamas, it's kind of muddled. But as sattva gets more and more pure, it's realizing, oh, I'm not that anger. I'm experiencing the feeling of anger. Everything in sattva, it's meant to bring us to sattvic consciousness. Experience your experience. Rather than just reactively go to roadblocks, okay, to simply be present with ourselves, with someone else, hold up the mirror, self-reflection. It's all about sattva. And sattva means I realize I am not intrinsically part of the material context in any way. I am this non-physical entity. That's sattvic realization when it's taken to completion. And that's not complete. That's nice. That's Brahman realization. I'm not matter. I'm spirit. And then more than that, and that's Kapila Dev's teachings to Devahuti, more than that is, yes, I'm not matter. I'm spirit. And I'm a servant of Supreme Spirit. I'm a servant of Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And so Kapila Dev, he talks very minutely in his 8 chapters there in the 3rd canto about the different elements of material nature. And he talks about devotional service, talks about what does devotional service in ignorance look like? He talks about it. What's it look like in rajas? What's it look like in sattva? What's it look like in pure loving transcendence? Just to be clear, devotional service is always pure, but it doesn't mean that in my attempts at devotional service, my consciousness is always pure. So I might be doing service in tamas, in rajas. So he analyzes all of that. Hare Krishna, thanks for listening. Thanks for your association here. I welcome at this time, if anyone would like to share any comments or ask any questions. Brielle.
It's not really spiritually related, but I just wrote that paper for the internship
Yes.
on the relationship between bhakti yoga and transformative communication, and I understood more like how brilliant it is what Sattva is doing by teaching transformative communication, because like the communication is in every sphere of life, and if we can help people to like learn how to listen before, like how to control that urge to speak and to speak assertively, to speak sattvikally, assertively, like it just makes so much sense. Like I see how brilliant it is, like to help people, like meet people where they're at, but like move them towards sattvic consciousness. It's just, I can't think of a better way to like meet people where they're at without like, yeah, like to give them spirituality that's not like spirituality.
I appreciate you sharing, and I'm even more eager now to read your paper. Thank you, Bhakti and Brielle. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
I think I saw on internet someone. Daru. Daru Brahma.
Just a little question about just the time thing. Like you went from going to Europe and then going to London, and then did you go from there? You say to Israel too?
Oh, you're talking about my history. Okay. Yes, I completed my Bachelor's of Science degree early in 1983 in Penn State. And then I backpacked around Europe for 4 months. And that's where, you know, after 3 years of like more than 1,000 plates of prasad in Pennsylvania, in Europe, that's where I started chanting Hare Krishna. And then part of Europe was I visited huge for Janmashtami, August of 83. I visited a huge Bhakti Yoga Janmashtami festival in Italy. They had 1,108 prasad preparations. I knew at that time, this is my path. And so, yes, and then, okay, and then my Europe travels culminated in, I took a boat from Italy to Greece, stopping in Crete, Cyprus. In Greece, also in Athens, there was an ISKCON center. I visited it. They didn't want to let me in. Big thing happening internationally that like Greece and America had bad relations, and the devotees, first of all, they thought I might be a CIA spy. No, really. And even if I wasn't a CIA spy, they thought the government will think that I am, and then the government's going to like shut them down. So they let me in for like 45 minutes to have some prasad. I didn't like stay there. And then I took a boat from Greece to Haifa to Israel. My first Israel, coming into Haifa, seeing the Ahmadiyya mosque right there on Mount Carmel. I came in the boat. So I went in Western Europe. I remember the first thing I got off in Haifa. First thing I see is soldiers with guns. It's like, but and then because I stayed in Israel for 8 years, so that just became. Even I was one of those soldiers with guns. I was on the streets with a gun actually, but then I hadn't seen that in any other time in my life. Yeah, so I went from Europe to Israel, and then I didn't go back to America till I visited in 1989. Hare Krishna. Thank you, Darren. Ananta Shakti.
Hare Krishna. Can you
Hare
hear me?
Krishna.
Okay, so you mentioned you mentioned
Ananta Shakti. Yes,
Wow.
Daru, you keep taking yourself off mute. There we go. Okay. So Ananta Shakti, please.
okay, yes. So you mentioned the trap of sattva, and can you talk a little bit more about that? How this could look like, or just
The thread of sattva, sure. The thread of sattva, that's what Ananta Shakti is. Okay, there's the verse, a well-known verse by Queen Kunti. Janme Shraya Shuta Shribir Edamanam Bada Puman Naivahatya Bidat Tumbai Tvama Kinchana Gochara. Yes, some of you are familiar with that verse. So she says that one who has the results of sattva, they might have a nice birth in a nice family, nice education, good looks, and nice wealth. And so sattva is the happiest mode. There's relatively less suffering. So sattva is the happiest mode. So Kunti says that when things are gone nice, sattvic, then it's difficult to call out with feeling. Krishna, please engage me in your service. Someone might I go to the temple on Sunday, or like that. But it's difficult to get intense, Tivrena Bhakti Yogena, because we're not suffering so much. For example, it's described, we can just look at our own lives, or look around us, but that's why the demigods have a lot of sattva compared to most everyone on this planet. But for the most part, the demigods, they're all devotees, and they have a lot of sattva. It's really nice. It's a high level of enjoyment, high level of happiness, relatively low level of anxiety and fear and envy and lust and greed and jealousy. But for the most part, the demigods don't go back to Godhead because they don't get intense about devotional service. And so Bhagavad Gita describes that sattva, there's relatively, of course, material happiness really is just relief from distress. But whatever we call it, so there's relatively less distress, more happiness. So Bhagavad Gita says, so then someone in sattva, maybe someone will be like a philosopher or a poet or maybe a scientist, like an intellectual and like that. But then Prabhupada writes in a purport in the 14th chapter, and then maybe they'll take birth again and again, and as a poet or a philosopher, still entrapped in a body that's subject to birth, death, old age, and disease. So the potential trap of sattva is we might not get really urgent and intense about serving Krishna purely, serving Srila Prabhupada 100%. We can see, I don't want to paint with too broad a brush, because let's call it in the New Age community, there's so much degradation and things like that. We can talk about that. But there's like a lot of vegetarian, yoga, and the Vedas, and in many respects, it's more sattvic than like just the gross materialistic parts of society. But we can see amongst that population, it's often difficult for them to really embrace devotional service. So I hope I responded to your question in some way.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Ananta Shakti. Dominique.
Just a quick question. You said that for people in, you just said that people in sattvic, like New Age or yoga, meditation types of practices or lifestyles, that it's relatively harder for them to get intense about devotional service. So is there like groups of people that you can name that you find or experience that have an easier time, like in this day and age, becoming intense about devotional service?
Graduates of the Sappatov seminars. That's one response. Her response is, she said that, okay, for those in yoga, New Age, it's relatively more difficult for them to take to devotional service. And Bhakti Dominic asked, is there some group that you would say it's relatively easier? In a sense, my response is no. No. Let me clarify. No, because amongst them in New Age, yoga, vegetarian communities, they've got special challenges that we just discussed, but they also have special advantages. That's why many who come to Krishna consciousness, they were chanting Om before. They were practicing Hatha Yoga. So there's advantages and potential disadvantages. And let's say if someone was someone's a devout Christian, okay? So there's potential advantages because they got personalism. The yoga community, New Age, they don't got personalism for the most part. I don't want to stereotype. But someone who's a devout Christian, they got personalism. It's easier for them to take to bhakti. Mm-hmm. At the same time, generally speaking, they might be attached to a sectarian conception of what is God, what is religion, and so that might make it a lot harder for them. So I'm not saying that yoga, New Age, vegetarian community, that's relatively harder for them. I'm just saying that particular community has some particular challenges to come to bhakti yoga related to the pitfalls of sattva.
Whereas, of course, people go to...
Hold on, Dara. Dominique, you want to express?
So each sector of society has its particular, generally speaking, each sector of society has its particular strengths that it could cultivate devotees out of that group, and then it has particular weaknesses.
Yes.
There's generalities, of course. There's always exceptions.
Yeah.
Okay, and I remember, I hope you don't mind, Malini, one time I feel like I heard Mother Malini say that she experienced that sometimes the rank and file 9 to 5 people or something like that, or okay, back when Prabhupada brought Krishna consciousness to the West, it was like very appealing to the counterculture.
Yeah.
Now, maybe Krishna consciousness isn't as appealing to the counterculture. Maybe it's more appealing to the 9-to-5 people who just are stuck in a job, something like that. And I found this all interesting, so I just wanted to take it more.
Thanks for sharing that. And, you know, essentially, ultimately, I want to avoid seeing someone as a member of a group and see this person as an individual. And at the same time, sometimes it's productive, like here, to have, let's call it, sociological discussions that can also help to refine our realizations. Like someone might look like a counterculture hippie person. Someone might look like a corporate climb the ladder yuppie person. And at the same time, I might want to notice my perceptions and not put them in a box. Thank you, Dominique.
Yeah. So I liked.
Dara, you're on mute.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I was saying that I like the way you say Sapato people because they're suffering so clearly in your program that they realize they have to turn to Krishna. They're not enjoying it all. But actually, another thing, the real important for it, what's that famous verse which says, if Krishna likes you, he may give you a nice wife or a nice husband or money or a nice house. But if he really likes you, he takes everything away from you. What's that verse? Famous verse.
Yasyaham anugrinami harishe taddanam.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. And so, like, I mean, I really felt, you know, like at one point, like I was a nicer guy. I wasn't like cheating on girls. You know, if I saw a girl and I say, all these other guys just cheating on these girls. They're going with other girls. You know, why not me, God? Why am I not getting the girls? And actually, it was mercy. He didn't let me fall into that, and I turned to him. You know, so it actually, you know, I'm just so merciful that he turned me toward him rather than let me get the other things, which could have wasted many years. You know, so.
Thanks for sharing your realizations and personal gratitude for Krishna working in your life, Dara. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi, Krishna.
Malini.
I just want to go back to the conversation about the mode of goodness, and like it's a pitfall because the level of happiness is such that there is no impetus for devotional service. Also, it seems that it's a pitfall because there is more chance for illusion of transcendence in it, that people feel like already realized, already kind of arrived at some spiritual something. So they feel like, oh, I'm already spiritual. And I was thinking about that, and I was thinking, okay, like everything else that Prabhupada teaches, it's for others, but it's also for ourselves, and how much practicing Krishna consciousness naturally bring us to a platform of sattva in our habits of eating, sleeping, you know, everything. And how that pitfall is also within the practice of Krishna consciousness, of because we are practicing, our life become better and more peaceful, and also seems to be more arrived somewhere in spiritual life. And how that pitfall may be there also, to not continue to go to the goal of devotional service, to not go to the goal of pleasing Krishna, and continuing with firm determination because of the comforts that come with practicing Krishna consciousness.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Malini. Yeah, right. The illusion of transcendence, and yeah, practicing devotional service. We do experience relief from miseries, and then we can stop there and not and become complacent, and that's a pitfall. Thanks for that, Malini.
Well, I have a question about you were talking about this is it's all related to the Sabbath thing, but like how the demigods are all devotees. So and yet they can be maybe stagnant in their enjoyment in sattva. And I'm wondering, like, if they're devotees, doesn't that naturally mean they are performing some sort of devotion? And wouldn't that accumulate over time and like create the circumstances for them to transcend?
Mhm.
Yeah, it does accumulate over time, and they are devotees, and they're doing service. They're doing service to Vishnu, maybe to Krishna, but certainly to Vishnu, the transcendental personality of Godhead, and it does accumulate. And it might, as it accumulates, it might take the form of, as a few 100,000 years or 100 million years pass, and then they're like, I really want to take birth in Lord Chaitanya's Sankirtan movement. I really want to be I really want to be a brahmachari in Prabhupada's movement on earth, because then it's like there's some austerity, because the whole earth thing, it's got some difficulties, but then like 70, 80 years and I'm finished, and there's not so many distractions here on the heavenly planets. So that's one form that the accumulation could take.
I have another question. One thing that really stood out to me is in the purport where Prabhupada says the word Atmagatim is significant in the sense of perfect knowledge of the Supreme. Could not be satisfied simply by knowing the qualitative equality of the Lord and the living being. One should know the Lord as much as can be known by our limited knowledge. So I'm wondering, like a few weeks ago, I was reading that verse about Brahma saying he can't like understand Krishna, and he's just like holding on earnestly onto his lotus feet. And I'm wondering how. Well, I have like kind of like one comment and a question. My comment is like, I see how, like personally, I'm so much more drawn to just stopping at being satisfied with knowing the qualitative equality of the Lord and myself. Like, it just seems like simple and easier, like just identifying as pure consciousness and bliss and eternality, and
Yeah.
experiencing that is just like way more attractive at this point to me, most days. And and then my question is like how to understand the Lord with our limited knowledge through like reading Shastra and stuff without getting into like a mode of like I need to understand to serve, or like like the understanding becoming like just about me understanding.
I'm not sure if I'm clear in your question. I mean, the basic epistemology described here, verse and purport, is, well, first of all, I appreciate your personalization, because by knowing the qualitative ability of the Lord and living being, that's the oneness of everything. That's kind of I am God sort of. There is no separate I, kind of like we're all one, and there's truth to that, it's all one spirit. And then the bhakti approaches, and that's not enough, that's not complete, and that won't be completely satisfying. So for further knowledge, for further realization of the absolute, then the process bhakti shrutaya grihitaya is through performing bhakti, and that's what Kapila teaches Bhuti. So by engaging in kirtan, by giving oral reception to Srimad Bhagavatam, not just for cognitive intellectual understanding, but with a devotional heart. And even if we do approach devotional service for knowledge, Krishna says, right, Chaturvida bhajanti mam jana sukritin arjuna tarjigasarachati ganita bharatar shaba. He says, four types of people approach me who are impure, but they're all very praiseworthy. One wants I want knowledge. I want knowledge, and so we engage in devotional service, and then knowledge gets revealed from a source higher than our material intelligence. Knowledge gets revealed from the Supreme Person. Just like if I want knowledge of you, Narayan, through analytical study, it's very limited how much I can understand about you. And to the extent that I gain your love and trust, you choose to reveal yourself to me. So through bhakti, then Krishna, through his pure devotee, through Super Soul, reveals himself to us, and we get more and more complete, deep knowledge of the Absolute. And even if we approach bhakti like, well, I just want to understand. Still, our motivate, or people, we approach bhakti because I want more money. I want my family members to be healthy. We might have some material motivation, but for whatever reason we approach, we become purified. As we become purified, our consciousness is more and more receptive for that self-revealed knowledge that's there in every syllable of Bhagavatam.
Thank you.
Thank you, Narayan.
I have a technical question that I was always wondering about.
Yeah.
It was mentioning there that Devahuti went to Vaikuntha planets, to the same planet of Kapila. And I was wondering all these different incarnations, like Kapila Dev, Narasimha Dev, what else is there, like Varaha, so many of them. Like in the cover of the Bhagavatam, they're represented as like forms of Narayan with different arrangements of the lotus flower and the conch shell and the disc. And that's like the difference. But I'm wondering if there are planets that actually, like Kapila, as he is depicted in the Bhagavatam, like with the golden, like his like external features, if he is actually represented there in the Vaikuntha planet, or it's just like another form of Narayan, which is called Kapila.
Okay. Well, thanks for your technical question, but this is transcendental technicalities. My understanding from purports like this is the answer is yes. You know, because we have those original covers of Bhagavatam, and then there's 24 Vishnu forms, four symbols, 4 arms, so there's 24 combinations, 24 primary names of Vishnu. But the number of Vaikuntha planets is innumerable, right? It's innumerable, so we just get those 24, just give us some idea. So my understanding is there is an Ayodhya in the spiritual world where Ram, in the Ram form that we hear about in the Bhagavatam, there is a Vamana Dev planet, there's a Kapila Dev planet that is from purports such as this one. That's my understanding.
Hey, Bo.
Hare Krishna.
Just a quick question. I mean, like I was surprised, you find out that Buddha is actually not a Vishnu incarnation. He's actually, I understand from Acharya that he's actually a soul. Now, how about what's his name here? What's his name again?
Kapila
yeah, is Kapila a soul or is he a Vishnu avatar? I don't know.
Okay, we could quickly look that up. There's many places in Prabhupada's writings where he talks about, who's Shakti Vesh avatar, who's Vishnu Tattva. Pretty sure that's like 90% that Kapila that Kapila Dev is Vishnu Tattva.
Really? Oh, okay.
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 It's Vishnu Tattva. That is my understanding. And we could look it up real quick on the Prabhupada database. Prabhupada does list those things clearly in various places. Thanks for that. And yeah, Buddha is Shakti Vesh avatar, Jiva soul. And now,
good. Thank you for confirming that, because that's what I've heard. Yeah, thank you.
and just for some foreshadowing before we close, in a few verses, we're going to hear about the Buddha incarnation. And it's very clear it's not the Buddha incarnation we're familiar with. It's a Buddha incarnation from a different Kali Yuga. In the third chapter of the first canto, the Buddha incarnation is the Buddha incarnation that we're familiar with, who appeared about 2,500 years ago. So in this chapter, a different Kali Yuga Buddha is described. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna. Thank you.